3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
Righto, Beau. Welcome to the Better Blokes Project podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on today.
All right.
Straight to it. What's the one piece of advice that you'd give to people trying to be 1% better every day?
Do more than 1%. So you're going to have, so for me personally, always used to have 80, 90%, or what I would have considered 80, 90%, always consistently, and didn't worry about the 1%er so much. But if you are trying to do things and get things done, to progress to anywhere, do multiple 1%ers. So they all add up. So it's just quick maths.
Yeah. It's not a maths podcast, but I guess what you're saying is have a few pokers in the fire.
Yeah. If you chip away at doing 1% of certain things, like a few guys have mentioned on this podcast about making your bed, there's actually like 5 rules that I don't know if any of you guys seen read Tools for Titans or Tools of Titans. It's a Tim Ferriss book. You should have a check it out. 2016. So basically, he's interviewed over 100 people, and they all go through, and you see through all these interviews, you actually see the trend of it's all these sort of 5 things. But some people get so deflated by not doing 5, where they can just do 1 here, 1 there, and if you do that 1% of whatever you're trying to achieve, it's still better than nothing.
Yep. Yeah, sweet. Moving on from that, bit about yourself, and I guess we'll lead into how that gets used in your life day to day.
I'm not great at talking about myself.
Blokes generally aren't.
Yeah. I wasn't sure how I was going. I was feeling a lot more confident when I signed up to this. So. And then guys, especially were like, oh damn, is that this weekend? Yeah. So I'm an electrician by trade. That's how I know Guy through previous workplace. I was there for 12 years, left there, moved to Sydney to pursue other things. Still in electrical, but just bigger and better things. Sort of moved back here end of 2019 and opened a business. I'm still working locally as an electrician and stuff as well. And then I got to a point 18 months ago, maybe, where I sort of didn't want to be here and do the business side of things anymore. So I sold that to my business partner and moved on. I went back to Sydney working again, just because for me, I've learned a lot of things in those last few years, especially through COVID. Met a few good people that made me more aware of a lot of things. And I prefer to work for someone, I think. I still like to have the whole business side of things and trying to do your own thing, much like this podcast and something. But I'd prefer to go there and do something for other people.
A lot of people really thrive on the stability of having someone to tell them what to do and not feeling like they have to constantly think about, fuck, what do I do now?
Well, for me, even with the business at the time, and I sort of stopped doing electrical for a while and was just doing the business, I sort of, when I added it all up, I'm like, I'm doing just as many hours. For.
You're just working your pay rate down?
Yeah, basically, yeah. Your hourly rate ends up being very minimal versus the jobs that I go to where you're still working 70-hour weeks, but you're getting paid for them. So definitely a money basis based on that. Like it's, it's what I'm valuing my time at, I guess, in the end.
How did that hit your mental health? And on that, is that when your 1%er sort of started to come out, or was that out before then?
I think it probably came around that whole time. It probably came sort of through that whole lockdown period of time and doing things and having a lot more time to think about it and talking to those other people. Sort of probably, one directional or something on viewpoints, but made me sort of be able to step back, have a more holistic look at other people. Like it's put other people's like why someone's or where something's coming from that other person, instead of just
Putting
being like
yourself in
you're
their
wrong.
shoes. Like,
Yeah. Instead of just being like you're wrong or that's not right. Whereas you sort of take a step back, you can sort of look at the whole situation a bit better. My 1%, I guess, sort of came around that similar time because I was injured. I hurt my leg pretty badly in a competition, and a powerlifting competition, and then the gyms locked down like 3 weeks later. Well, the whole world did, but and then I had to sort of sit through that and try and rehab that through with, just everything being a bit harder to access medical, professions and stuff like that. So, but that's when, I really had to, I guess when everyone was sitting at home, that's when you sort of realise that you really had to sort of get up and start doing those little bits to, to get out the other side, I suppose.
Yeah.
How'd you come?
You go.
Righto, I'll go.
Jinx, double jinx. No, I guess you when you go back into lockdown, you haven't got the opportunity to go out and do the big things. So you've got to be doing those little things to keep you moving forward, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now go.
Is it my turn?
Yeah, go.
How'd you go finding that book? Was that just you found on the shelf in the library, or did you see a professional
the Tools for Tidying book, I guess a mate and I sort of started reading a lot more. That was just a book that sort of came about because it was pretty new. Like I read it sort of around 2016, 2017. That's when a lot of things in my life changed. I separated from a long-term partner. I worked a lot that year. I ultimately led into leaving my job of 12 years as well. Not because of that book, but definitely sort of I travelled a bit more as well, and that sort of just changed my whole perspective on life. I'd had this one perspective, I guess, which is that whole holistic thing I was talking about. I had this one perspective and I travelled a bit more, and then I was like, oh, hang on a second. I don't have to do this all the time.
Yeah, there's other things to do, isn't there? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I guess that's something else. Like, don't feel like and other people have touched on it here as well. That you don't feel like you're stuck. Like everyone will get to that point where they feel like they're stuck in a situation or whatever, or can't go do something because they always make excuses within themselves, or whether they verbalise them or whatnot. But just do it.
Send it.
Yeah, pretty much. Calculated.
Yeah, right. What's our next question? I forget.
We'll dive into what else do you do for, I know off air, we were sort of talking about how, exercise was something that was, really important for you. And then, past couple of years, it's probably dropped away a little bit, and you've found that maybe that void wasn't as big as perhaps you thought it was going to be when you lost that opportunity to train. So what have you done now to look after yourself?
I think I still have to keep busy. I like keeping busy. That's sort of me. That's sort of going to work for someone, being out of that way, working those long hours and stuff. That's me. I've always got to have something on. But I guess how that void, as you say, I guess that was just progression in my life. When I started doing that, I needed to do that. I actually did it for not so much mental health at the time. It was actually physical health. I had a really bad back and walking around on concrete all day, and I started looking into it myself. I'd always had trouble since a teenager, and then that just worked in. I was like, wow, this feels good. And then it just progressed, and then 10 years later, I had a really bad nerval problem in my hand, and that's what actually pulled me up in 2020. I don't recommend that to anyone. That was really bad.
A nerve problem, did you?
Yes, I had nerve pain in my arm. I was on some pretty heavy medication for that, and actually coming off that medication, that was mentally tough. Yeah, it was really bad. Yeah.
Can you? Do you mind talking about that a little bit? Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I know I do remember when I was coming off that medication. It was the worst time of my life. Like, I've had some pretty serious muscular injuries, a lot of them, repetitive ones, and but that was hard mentally. Because I wasn't training, and that's what stopped the training. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even hold a bottle of water. Like, I couldn't hold anything round with that hand. Like, I couldn't do anything. And I was sleeping no longer than 4 hours a night for over a couple of weeks before I got that medication, because it's pretty heavy medication. So they would not.
They don't hand it out.
They're not willing to hand it out that well. So and I do have previous history of medications and stuff as well. Like, so they're like, this can affect your mental health and stuff like that. So, yeah, so it's pretty tough.
How, if you don't mind me digging into that part a little bit and don't need to answer it, but how, obviously, knowing a little bit about electrical, I'm assuming you use your hands a fair bit. How did that affect work?
Yeah, it stopped. It was a bit of a trick. Employed essentially either, so I sort of didn't have any insurances or anything, so that was it all played a little bit of a part, but yeah, it was impossible. Like, I mean, I couldn't even lift weights in the gym I owned, so like that, so it was pretty tough. There's basically everything that I do, I couldn't do anymore.
Yeah. And driving's obviously a thing for you as well. Is that impacted through the hand or not so much?
I had an automatic, so it wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
And when I woke up as the day went on, it actually subsided, but it was, and you'd go to bed okay, but then you'd wake up a couple of hours and it was just excruciating and trapped again.
Yeah, right. Is that it's on the mend? Like it's
very, yeah, it's fine now, but sometimes I wake up and it's a little bit bad, but it's fine.
Is it a manageable thing, or is it something that you can have an operation and fix? Or
operations are pretty extreme for that sort of thing, especially Nerval, because generally they can just make it worse.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. And you mentioned the medication hit your mental health. What part of sort of, I guess, your mental health was impacted, and what have you done since? I'm assuming you've sort of started to come off that. Like, what have you done to sort of help your mental well-being?
So the nerve blocker they use is also used for extreme cases of anxiety.
You're right.
So I felt great while I was on it.
Yeah.
And endone as well, obviously. So it's an opiate. So I felt that was mainly of a night time to help me sleep, get me to sleep. So yeah, I felt amazing. And I guess to a point when I came off it 3 months later, it was rough. I imagine that's what it feels like for some of those people that have to come off heavy drugs. So it was pretty wild. It was pretty wild. I do remember I've got a good friend that I haven't seen in 10 years, but we still message, and I just remember messaging her, and I was just like, just letting you know I'm coming off all these medications and I'm not okay. And that's all I needed to send to be okay. But yeah, I didn't know if I was coming or going. It was pretty wild. Yeah, because I was coming off heavy opiates, so it was pretty wild. Yeah.
What are you doing now for your mental well-being?
So I've forcing myself to get back into training after that lull. I think because I've got more time on my hands now, whereas going from that training ending to going back to Sydney to work and working 70-hour weeks, I didn't have that routine. So, I was like, I guess I was back to square one as, people that struggle to, find the time to go to gym when they've probably got plenty of time. Like, I sort of I couldn't get into that momentum. So now I'm forcing myself, I've got more time to get back into that a bit. And yeah, it feels good. Like, it's one of those things, just because it doesn't so much give you a really high peak, it still makes you feel good and better from it.
It sets you on a good path, I think.
Yeah, I've been training every morning as well, so I've been waking up just trying to get back into that routine and just doing it. Historically, I've always trained after work, which has been in the evening, but now I'm doing it to kickstart my day, essentially.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've picked up with some of the more than 50% of our last 28 episodes, or 29, however many. I actually started going back in August and going before work, 5 a.m., which is, just starts your day off. Yeah, so for the strength sports that I was doing, it's not optimal to try and lift, consistent. But it's about consistency as well. If you only lift X amount of weight at 6 o'clock in the morning, it's going to be the same all the way through. Whereas it's when you chop and change in the strength. So for me at the moment, I'm sort of not in a position where, or at a point where I'm trying to be as strong as what I can. So, it's working for me at the moment. I'm essentially go to the gym unfed and have breakfast when I come back. But, if I was in a point where I was looking at competing again or something, it probably wouldn't be optimal. But, yeah.
Can you tell my wife that? The amount of times she said, you should train in the morning. I said, I can't lift as much in the morning. And she's like, you haven't tried.
Yeah, it's all about that consistency, because if you went through all your mornings, you're eventually going to get from point A to point B, which is your strongest, based off that continual timeline. But if you're going in the afternoon, you're like, I'm so much stronger because, you've been essentially, your CNS and everything's primed from work during the day. You're fed, you've had calories in you instead of just being lazing around. And, it's known that you wake up with cortisol, higher cortisol as well, which is stress. So, you shouldn't have that. Hopefully you shouldn't have that by the end of your workday.
Do you have other structures and other set routines, I suppose, with your 1% doing that sort of stuff over and over again to make it better each day?
I think where I was coming from with do more of those 1%ers is when you are out of routine more. Like I said, so for me, I was just it's a mental challenge to be righto, and that's why I brought the training back in and changed the time. Before I was trying to do it at 3:00 in the afternoon on my week off work, and I'm I'm busy doing that or catching up with someone or something. So I'm if I wake up, do that straight away and create that routine. I mean, I guess everything that you do and all these 1%ers that most people were saying that it's all about that consistency and routine ultimately. Yeah. Even you're making your bed and all that sort of stuff.
And that's the idea of the 1%ers as well, mate. The 1%ers come from Atomic Habits. So
exactly,
if you've read that. So the idea of that is, you do these 1%ers every day for 365 days a year, and you ultimately end up with a 37%. It's some
37 times, isn't it?
No, I think it's percent.
Should be more than 37%.
I think it's times.
It might be times now. Yeah.
not a maths podcast, but
no. Yeah, exactly. Clearly not a maths podcast.
Maths with two Fs.
Yeah, maths. Maths. Yeah. What isn't that fucking isn't that the Housewives show or something? Anyway.
Oh God, don't go there.
No, but yeah, it's that repetitive consistency, and Lockie talked about that in the last episode as well. That consistent effort to. His was more about that consistent effort of networking and being the same person consistently, and just showing up as being that consistent person in themselves. And that is that whole idea of the 1% is if you can implement something small, and that's the purpose of that 1%, if you can do that 1% thing really well and consistently do it day in, day out, you will be this much better at the end of 12 months.
Setting yourself up for success.
Yeah.
The other one I was going to ask is around your 1%, as you said, sort of have a few pokers in the fire. What do those pokers look like? What specific activities are you doing?
So for me, it's that trying to bring right now. It's that routine. I get up, I'll cook the same breakfast of the morning at the moment, and then I'll go train. And I've chosen to get back into it. I've chosen something that I like. I enjoy lifting weights, but I've been coached by multiple coaches over the years, and there's just one program in particular that I just know I will go do, and that's basing exactly on what we're talking about. I can go do that because it's better than not doing anything.
Yep.
It's not the most optimal out of all the ones that I've done, but it's one that I enjoy, and it's the one that I've started using this year to get me back into it.
You know it'll get done.
That's right.
Is it like the goal setting where you set an easy goal to make sure you achieve it, and then you're bang, I've smoked that one, now I can set a bigger one, and then Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And then, just trying to get on everything on top of health in general and stuff like that. Last 12 months I've been that busy working and whatnot, and being based in Sydney. It's very hard to chop and change these sort of things. I'll be I'll go see a doctor here, and then all of a sudden I've got a different project. I'm on a different project, different job, and I'm based out of Tasmania again. It's now I've got to go back to a doctor here. That's affected me with some of my permanent medications, which I've seen a few of you put. Because in 2018 I got diagnosed with ADHD, which definitely that's changed my life. And I'd say, looking back on the start of this conversation just earlier, that's where a lot of things changed for me. So that was just for the better.
The diagnosis,
and
understanding of self.
Yeah, and taking that medication and looking back on things and even through you look through high school and stuff like that. I would always start off in the higher class and end up in the middle one. Science was the only one that I stayed in high, which is pretty obvious because I used to enjoy it. And it was more hands-on, more practical, and that's sort of how I am a bit more. That's certainly changed. I've seen health professionals all my life ever since college for different reasons, and now even looking at that person that I talked about, particularly that I became friends with, and that she normalised a lot of it as well, because you used to always sort of have that. There's always stigma around it. There still is. Yep. That's why we're having this conversation. Mm. But she normalised. She's I go see a therapist. That's just what she does, because she just.
It's someone to help, really. It's just another tool in your toolkit.
Yeah, exactly.
While we're on that is the big premise of this is that these things are normal for everyone out there.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Like we've had this conversation before, and I think it's come up in the podcast or it's come up somewhere else. It's something now that we've given it a name and it's talking about mental health. But back in the day, like I think about my dad's generation, like Dad used to hang out down at the soccer club and he'd be down there and be having chats with like all of his mates and that kind of stuff. You'd have your blokes at the footy club or the cricket club or whatever. And although they didn't call it a mental health chat, they were just fucking chatting.
Exactly. And I guess that's this world that we live in now with the whole social media and that. It makes you connect with everyone, but we're less connected than ever. So and that's exactly what you're saying. You sit around, people would go down to the local pub, whatever, the soccer clubs. People used to have people over and do all that sort of thing. Now when we go to if we have dinner and host dinner, it's like this big thing. It's like, wow, and you feel great afterwards. You chatted it all about it, and it's like, yeah, but that used to be a common thing.
Why don't we do that every week, not
because
every month?
We lived in smaller communities then as well. You grew up where we all would have grown up. We would have known all the neighbours, everything like that. I lived in my place in the Trove for 4 years, and I knew some of the neighbours only because I knew them before I moved there. The other ones I didn't know. Because it just wasn't like it was growing up.
That's where that community stuff's going to come back so much into it. Like kids nowadays are doing sport, just crazy amounts of sport, and that's all they're going to be tied to now. If some kids do sport 3 or 4 days a week, it's lots more than what I would have ever done as a kid. I don't remember any kid when I was there doing sport 3 or 4 days a week.
I done lots of sports.
I did lots of sports, lots of different sports,
even school
all year
sports,
round.
lots.
I played. I'd done soccer, surf club, taekwondo, like all judo all at the same time.
Yeah, I did taekwondo, I did football in the winter, cricket in the summer, played through hockey in there somewhere, and I don't actually know. My parents did it. I lived 30 minutes out of town at the time, and it was a big. It was. Around and wait for my mum to come pick me up when she knocked off work. Whereas now it's like it's got to be there and then. I've got to get a lift from here. I've got to go here. But
the kids can't be unattended because that's all.
It's very different. Very, very different.
It is. It's that whole community connectedness thing is something that I think is going to continue coming up. It is a big thing for, as you have already alluded to, like we're more connected on a phone than we ever have been. But then you look at, I can't remember the specific name of the report, we are more lonely as a society than we ever have been.
Of course.
And that's across young people, old people, every metric. We're more lonely and show more signs of that lack of social connection than we ever have done. So it is something that we do need to work on.
Yeah, well, like I sort of said before about the community thing, like, your auntie or someone would rock up to your house and it was an issue. Like, I mean, now you've got to call ahead, plan it, because it's a big issue if someone just rocks up to your house and knocks on your door. Like it's weird. What we normalise now is completely different.
100%. I reckon that's a good spot. Thank you very much for everything that you've shared and being open today and having a bit of a chat about your own journey and what you've sort of gone through. If there's been anything in this that's been triggering for others at home, please, first off, chat to a mate. Otherwise, like obviously a GP is a good point of call. And if you're really struggling, reach out to Lifeline 13 11 14. Can't recommend their service enough. Other than that, thanks very much, mate.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Great.
It's been good.
Nice
Thank you.
one.
Cheers.